Here are the main flaws in this argument. The first and the most important flaw is that the first study was flawed, but what happened with the later studies? Have the later studies been able to establish that the truth is contrary to the findings of the first study, and therefore saturated fats does not increase the risk of heart diseases? Nothing like that has been suggested by the author, and this remains a major gap in his reasoning. The second main flaw is using the term the medical fraternity is divided. If the fraternity is divided, it does not necessarily mean that saturated fats do not lead to the onset of chronic diseases. In fact, it only means that a certain part of the fraternity believes that saturated fats lead to the onset of these chronic diseases. And even if they don't lead to the onset of the diseases, whether they'll aggravate the condition if it is already present has not been commented upon by the author. This is another flaw which is a bit difficult to catch here. But think saturated fats may not be leading to onset, but if this condition is already there and saturated fats are aggravating the situation, then that is also a serious side effect. Then author makes no mention of various other possible ill effects such as weight gain, lethargy, etc. Author has centered his argument only on heart of risk diseases, onset of chronic diseases, and some bit of good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. He has not talked about various other possible bad effects such as weight gain, lethargy, etc. And does the positive effect of the saturated fats, the small positive effect it seems to be talking here, that it turns bad cholesterol into good cholesterol, whatever, then it is a small positive effect. But whether the net impact of saturated fats is positive on health, that has not been suggested. And without such a clear reasoning, it is difficult to reach this particular conclusion that saturated fats are bad for health is deeply flawed. The perception that saturated fats are bad is deeply flawed. That means, in other words, the author is saying that saturated fats are not bad for health. And therefore, while saying this, the net impact has to be determined. The author must have suggested a fine comparison of the positives and negatives and suggesting that the net impact overall is not negative. So these are the main flaws in this reasoning. I hope you were able to find quite a few of them. Except one, the others may not be very difficult to determine. These are only 5 flaws in this particular reasoning. In case you were able to find around 4 flaws, you did a fine job. A good format would be to have an introduction, and if you were able to find 4 flaws, have one paragraph for each flaw and then have a clear conclusion. The intro must always suggest that you are not convinced by the reasoning. Your stand that the reasoning is not convincing has to come out very, very clearly in the introductory paragraph. Then each paragraph, however small, must talk about each flaw separately. Do not mix 2 flaws in one paragraph. And then a conclusion that suggests that on the basis of this reasoning suggested here, the argument by the author is not convincing. That will be all.